So, welcome to ELT in Chile, a podcast about teaching English in Chile and also, of course, in other countries. So, in this space, I like to talk to teachers, teacher trainings, and experts who like to share their experiences and expertise regarding English language teaching, not only in Chile, like I said, but also around the world. So, in this video episode, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Peter Crosthwaite. So, Dr. Peter Crosthwaite is a senior lecturer in the School of Languages and Cultures at the University of Queensland, Australia. Having formerly been an assistant professor at the Center for Applied English Studies at the University of Hong Kong. He holds an MA in TESOL from the University of London, also a Master in Philosophy and PhD in Applied Linguistics from the University of Cambridge. His areas of research include corpus linguistics, one of my favorite topics, the use of corpora for language learning, also known as data-driven learning or DDL, which sounds a little bit threatening for people like when they see DDL, as well as English for general and specific academic purposes. He has published in leading journals including Language Learning, Corpus Linguistics and Linguistic Theory, Studies in Second Language Acquisition, Journal of English for Academic Purposes, English for Specific Purposes, Computer Assisted Language Learning, the Journal of Second Language Writing, and the International Journal of Learner Corpus Research. Dr. Crosthwaite is also the author of the monograph Learning the Language of Dentistry, Disciplinary Corpora in the Teaching of English for Specific Academic Purposes, as part of Benjamin's studies in Corpus Linguistic series, as well as one of my favorite books, the edited volumes Data-Driven Learning for the Next Generation, Corpora and DDL for pre-tertiary learners and referring in a second language, which is the last book, reference to person in a multilingual world with Rowledge. So, welcome to ELT in Chile, Peter. Thank you for accepting my invitation to the podcast. And I have many questions for you. So, let's get started. The first thing is, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. As I said, just hoping the dog doesn't bark and hope we can get through it. I'm surprised you read out like the whole bio. Like most people, just choose a couple of sentences and go with that. So
No, but I think there were many important things that we had to mention, especially, let's say, the book that I said, like data-driven learning for the next generation, Corpora and DDL for tertiary learners. I think, I don't know if you, well, I have many questions for you. So, well, one of the first things that we'll have to, let's say, confess is that there was a time difference. So that was here in Chile, it's 9 p.m. What time is it in Australia at the moment?
10 o'clock in the morning. Although I feel your pain because as you know, I run my own seminar series on corpus linguistics for education, right? But most of our participants are kind of in Europe or in Brazil because we partner with the State University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, right? So I have to do my podcast, like my seminar series from 9 p.m. my time. So I'm usually finished like 10:30 actually. But then for the guys in Brazil, they're waking up like super early. So yeah, everybody's the time zone thing is awkward, but at the same time, I think it's really cool that now we've got this technology after COVID to be able to do these kind of things in real time. Like when I grew up, like computers were still like using cassette tapes and stuff like that. You know, there wasn't even any internet and your monitor was like green only, and now like we can do this kind of thing in real time around the world. It's just insane.
Absolutely. And actually, yeah, we're going to talk about technology, and actually, we can use technology to teach English and, of course, let's say linguistics. So that would be one of my first questions. Peter, how did you become interested and involved in teaching English in general or in linguistics? How was
so for teaching English in general, I started, well, I did my undergraduate degree in English literature and cultural studies. But as a graduate, I found that employability was a little bit difficult. And one day I was reading in the newspaper on the way to work randomly. It was like opportunities, teach English in South Korea. So this is back in 2003. So it doesn't feel like that long ago for me, but it's like 20 years now. I basically just did a short TESOL course. I think it's like 120 hours or something like that. And then they gave me a placement in South Korea. They promised me like a place called Yecheon, which is like for those who don't know South Korea, I thought they said Incheon, right? Which is like a major city where the big airport is. But it turns out this place, Yecheon, is like this tiny little village in the middle of nowhere. So I got on the plane, got in the taxi. They kind of took me to this place out in the middle of the countryside. I was like, "That's your school. That's where you're going to be teaching." And I managed there. I learned the craft, learned to become an educator, a language teacher with essentially like very little technology at all. First lesson is literally just a whiteboard, some markers, not even the textbooks around, chalkboard in a high school, things like that. I actually using chalk and choking on the chalk dust, that kind of stuff. And then things progressed through there. I moved into a bigger city. I started teaching at university level, started becoming interested in language testing in particular. IELTS was a big thing, still is a big thing, but it was a big thing for me to be teaching back then. And as I was progressing through that, I wanted to take on more professional development. So then I did the Masters of TESOL at London. And then I enjoyed that so much that I wanted to go on and develop my knowledge more. So then I did the MPhil and PhD in applied linguistics at Cambridge. And it was through that experience then that I really developed a kind of knowledge and passion for applied linguistics and how the research in applied linguistics could help to inform language teaching so that I could go on and train people like me, who, the younger versions of me, to go on and not have to use kind of a chalkboard or a whiteboard and things like that, but how to incorporate some of the latest technologies and language related technologies into teaching to make that task much easier for them. And long story short, that's basically kind of led me to where I am today.
Yeah, I mean it's a very good thing to hear how people became teachers, or how people actually become involved in
Yeah,
teaching.
some people kind of like born into it, like that. I mean, my mother was also a teacher, my father also a teacher. So, but it's not like I had this burning desire to go into teaching, but I had a burning desire to travel, and the teaching and the travel came together. But then I found afterwards that I enjoyed the teaching now more than the travel. So, yeah, it's weird how people fall into the job, but people from all kinds of life, they do end up following this path, and I was just one of the many who do.
Yeah, very good. Like I think I've said this before, that corpus linguistics is a fascinating topic, but we also come across DDL a lot, like data driven learning or data driven learning. Peter, how would you explain that to somebody who doesn't know so much about it? An English teacher who
Okay.
comes across the topic of DDL.
So with DDL, basically we are exposed to language data throughout our lives. And one of the things that separates, say, a first language user or native speaker of a language is their exposure to language input over the course of their lives. So somebody who was born in a monolingual or even multilingual environment will have received exposure of that language input, that language data over the years of their lives into the millions, billions of words and so on. And second language learners, when they come to the task of learning a second language, they've also got quite rich experiences of acquiring their own language. But when it comes to the second language, they may not have had that same level of exposure for various reasons. Maybe they live in a context where access to the target language is limited. There are no native speakers of the target language that live there. Opportunities for education are limited, access to technology may be limited, and so on. So, one way to speed up the process of getting that input is through exposure to language data. And one of the best repositories of language data outside of Google, for example, or YouTube, is in the form of language corpora. And resources have developed over the last 2 decades, so allowing access to these collections of millions or even billions of words, and increasingly free and available online with the latest kind of concordances and other different kinds of technology, that give you different pathways into this data. So then over the last 2 decades, that's why we've seen this big increase in people who were using corpus linguistics, say, for research purposes, but then a number of people, including myself as language teachers, have seen the potential of this for developing language teaching materials and by extension, then also giving language learners access to these corpus resources for their own language learning purposes. And that's really what we think of by data-driven learning. So it's learning about language through exposure to these multi-million word collections of language. And for a range of different learning purposes, whether that's for general English, vocabulary, learning of multi-word expressions or idiomatic phrases, looking at language at different proficiency levels, looking at language in different disciplinary domains, all of these different things that we have corpora for and corpus resources available for. We've seen applications in language learning and teaching for all of these different areas. So as the field continues to develop, we're seeing more and more. And my work, outside of the work that I did on English for academic purposes at the university level, we're now also starting to see an increase in studies with learners outside of tertiary education. So learners in secondary school, some cases even primary school, or out in the workplace and so on. So I wouldn't say it's mainstream yet. I think there's still a long way to go before we get that kind of app that makes it really mainstream. But certainly now, all the major publishers are interested in this kind of approach to making language learning teaching materials. And also there's a ton of new apps and applications out there that use corpus technology or give learners direct access to corpus data for language learning and teaching purposes. And I think all the major publishers have recognized the potential of this in the industry.
And yeah, thank you very much. I think, yeah, I mean, in terms of, there's a lot of data available, but now there are many things that you can do with that data. I mean, we can, of course, for language, there are tons of it. And I have a question for you. Do you remember maybe a specific point where you maybe discovered DDL or corpus linguistics? Do you remember that moment when you said like, oh, what can I do with this, all this information?
Yeah, 100%. I think it was really when I started at my professional career after graduating at the University of Hong Kong, and I worked there under Professor Ken Hyland, who you may know is one of the world's leading experts in English for academic purposes. And one of the things that that center was very good at was the use of or disciplinary English for specific purposes courses. So they would start off with a general English for academic purposes with all their students in the first year. And then in the second year, almost all students took a disciplinary language course. So like English for dentistry, English for science, English for geography, that kind of thing. And one of the ways we found that could teach that or was the use of disciplinary corpora. So constructing corpora of published work in that area, and then giving students concordance tools to allow them to access that data, and embedding, creating language teaching tasks that would go into their course materials that would force them to go into the corpus data to answer the questions, and through that discovering some of the trends in the language data that was specific to their discipline. I think the other thing was we used to take in hundreds or thousands of written essays by students every year as part of their the English for academic purposes course. There would be one at the beginning when they entered the university, so when they don't really know much in the way of academic language, then one towards the end of the semester, and then one is their final assessment. And one of the things that I did as a researcher in one of my first research project was to build a learner corpus of that data. So then I was able to track the development of academic English over time. And now that was a great research tool, but then I also started embedding that into some of my summer language teaching courses that I had on academic English, and getting students to use Corpora to look at some of this learner data, to look at some of the errors that they made and some of the multi-word units that they used often and the things that they might need to know to get better scores. And it was through experience of running those workshops that I really got interested in this as something that I wanted to research and to embed into my teaching practice. So I guess that's where it really started. And then after that, I tried to do it with younger learners as well, but it wasn't really until I came here to Australia, where I had access to more schools, that I was able to hold some teacher training workshops, and then finally to do some research using Corpora with secondary school students here in Australia. So that's pretty much where I'm at, from the journey, from how I got interested in it and how I started developing it to where I am today.
Yeah, very good, very good. I mean, yeah, the idea of how, let's say, we have, like I said before, so much data, but there are some questions that maybe we would like to answer in terms of language use, or how specific structure works and things like that. Uh, what's your
Yeah.
experience, Peter, when, let's say, when you have to, let's say, teach other teachers how to use DDL? Uh, do they react in a reluctant way? Do maybe data-driven learning, does it sound a little threatening? At the beginning for teachers when you present
Yeah,
this
certainly.
area.
I see that there are many different types of people who work as teachers, even within the same school. So you'll get people who are initially very positive. They're the kind of people who I think ordinarily in their practice like to try new things and are interested in things. And then I do like demo workshops for all teachers in the school. And I have no expectation going in that they're all going to be on board with this and that they're all going to see the value in it. But as long as I can make it clear kind of the potential of what is possible, then what will usually happen is I'll start to get some emails after those sessions saying, well, I'm interested, or I have this particular problem, this particular issue with my students. Can your approach help with that in some way? And that's usually the way that I've gone about it. So I think there's a lot of studies out there of teacher training workshops that um, kind of treat it as this kind of magic bullet that's going to solve all your problems, or they don't really talk. They focus more on training the teachers to use the Corpora and to use the Corpora's tools, but they don't focus so much on how to embed the Corpora and embed Corpora's consultation into actual lesson planning, or embedding it into tasks. And with my experience as a language teacher over the last 20 years, I think that I have that ability to see where in a lesson plan or where in a particular activity that Corpora or Corpus resource could be used to make that activity more interactive. So I think that's where I've had most success in persuading people that this is worth trying and this is worth having a go at. And I think also as the tools have gotten better, a lot of studies in the past have used quite complex tools, or tools that are not particularly user friendly or that have very complicated interfaces. So then, of course, when the teachers have a go at these, and a lot of them may not necessarily be very good with technology in the first place, they might have a go at the tool and they go like, well, I don't know how it works, so how are my students ever going to learn it? And then, but I think over the years, we now have a kind of suite of tools that are much more user friendly and give you straight access to the data without having to click through so many different things. And they're free, they're available online. We on the last 10 years has been really good in terms of the development of such tools. And I always try to revisit the tools that I use to make sure that I'm demonstrating the simplest and the most effective tools available. So there's different things you can do there. But yeah, certainly, I think it's the same with any kind of technological innovation. There were probably people who didn't have smartphones in the beginning because they were worried about radiation or whatever, or
Yeah.
there are people who didn't want to use a computer in the class because it might delete everything. You always get this kind of thing. I've had teacher training workshops before where I've put in the corpus data on a USB chip, and then they don't know how to copy the stuff from the USB chip to the.
Yeah.
So then you can't really do much in that kind of situation. But it's about, for me, it's definitely pointing out areas in the teacher's ordinary practice where they can use this stuff to make what they do now better and more interactive. So that's the key to success so far for me, I think.
Well, I think you mentioned, let's say, two really interesting things. So the first one was that, well, there is a lot of potential in, use in DDL, corpus linguistics, and maybe some of the software that we can use. But yeah, many people use it, for example, in my own case, to create exercises. But there's also a lot of potential to use it for course planning as well, or to try to deal with more
Yeah,
specific, let's say areas. But let's say here in
yeah.
Chile, at least, the experience has been mostly at a university level. When I saw your book, like the data-driven learning for the next generation, and that for me that was very eye-opening because it's like, oh yeah, we can try to, of course, like children actually and teenagers use more technology than us that what we know as technology. So, do you see any advantages in or how? First of all, I would like to know how you conceived, let's say, your book, data-driven learning for the next generation. What were you looking for, or what was the idea behind that specific book?
Yeah, basically, I think it just came from my experiences as a language teacher over the years, working with people of all ages, and obviously, pretty much all of the research on corpora and data-driven learning at that point had all focused at university level and adults, and that's fine. But I think obviously, if anything is to gain greater acceptance among the public, you need to go outside of academia and you need to start talking to different people. And one of the first places where I started was to look at high school, secondary school, to try to bridge the gap between academia and so-called like real education in the real world, I guess. And I think there's definitely a lot of potential there, and the teachers that I've been working with to date have all shared that kind of sentiment. Like they have specific problems in their job that, or with their group of students that they need help with, and they see the value and potential of corporate data-driven learning for solving not all of those problems, but certainly for solving very specific issues with very specific people. And I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, let's say, because many people, when they think of technology, they think of, for example, social media. But when we talk about technology for language learning, there are many, like you said, websites, concordance. There are plenty of software, to download big quantities of data, So let's say in that case, I think, I mean, has a lot of potential. And what about, let's say, what's your experience using this with, younger people, let's say using DDL or corpus linguistic? Has it been? Is it, I don't know, easier? I'm thinking of, because I haven't done it here in Chile. I would like to do it, but let's say, what's your experience? What has been your experience like? When
Um, so far, in terms of the work that I've been doing with high school students, is that one of the things that really makes it work is not to kind of introduce it as a homework or something that's extra to
Mm,
what they ordinarily have to do. And that's because they're already very busy. They have to do a lot of work at school. They have to do a lot of homework as well. So, and they also don't tend to trust people who come in from somewhere else to say, like, here's this tool, you need to learn how to use this, it's going to solve all your problems. So I found that really working together with the teachers and letting the teachers actually if you work with the teachers first, and the teachers then understand where in their practice they can use this tool, and then if the teachers are the ones to bring that to the students and say, hey, look, I've got this kind of activity here. Do you want to have a go with this? Or say the student has a specific problem, like they tend to rely on translation websites too much, or they often like ask too many questions about what words mean, or you notice lots of mistakes in their kind of writing and so on. Then the teacher may go to that student and introduce some software through some kind of homework or scaffolded task, but really to just embed it within like normal everyday school practice, to say like, this is kind of how we do things at this school, and here are some of the a suite of tools that we use. I think that has definitely seen some success, and we call that like really, in computer assisted language learning terms, like integration of technology, right? And that full integration is best championed by the teachers, I think, rather than someone like me coming in and saying like, here's this great thing, it's going to solve all your problems. So that's one aspect of it, and I think another thing is to really tailor the tool and the corpus data and the activities towards the specific cohort of students. So at the school I was working at previously, I was actually working with two groups. One was with mainly monolingual English speakers who were using corporate to learn more about science writing. And then I was working with another group who were kind of second language or English as an additional language learners, and they were learning it more for like general vocabulary and like error correction and things like that. And one kind of issue that I had is that I used the same approach to teach both groups. Like I developed these online materials on this online like learning course called edX. I had the students go through the activities and do similar tasks, and everything worked great pretty much for the monolingual group. But then the second language group, they really didn't take to it at all. And I realized that it was very important to be able to differentiate the approach to be specific to the needs and abilities of the different groups that I was working with. So certainly having close discussions with their subject teachers, and then going in and asking them, what works, what doesn't work, and being able to accept that the approach that you originally planned may not be the best one, and being able to accept failure and going back to the drawing board and having another think about what might work. That's something that I experienced over the last couple of years, but I think that as a result of that experience, I'm now much better equipped to go back and say, maybe that tool didn't work, but here's another one that might, or that approach to introducing you to corporate didn't work, so I'm going to try a different approach this time. I think university students, it's a little bit easier. You can just kind of tell them, hey, do this, and then they'll go ahead and do it. But
Yeah.
with the high school students, they're really selective about what they in, and if you can lose them very quickly.
Absolutely. I think that's true. You can lose them, let's say, very quickly after one activity, and they don't want to do it again. In the case of,
100%.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In the case of, let's say, my experience using corpus linguistics at university, what has happened is that students tend to be really ambitious. They see, like this huge amount of data, and they want to compare the, I don't know, 100 novels or,
Yeah,
50 TV series. And we have to really like tell them, okay, you can do that if you want, but that's going to take you years. If you want to spend so much time, that's up to you.
that's it. You'll get people who just kind of take off, and then they'll go ahead and do things with the corpora that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
So in one of the things in the DDL for younger learners book that you just jogged my memory about actually was that my chapter in that book dealt with two primary school students who we introduced to Sketch Engine, or Skell, I think it was, as a result of like private tutoring sessions. So I had a private tutor who was working with these two boys. The private tutor was also a PhD student at our university, so we kind of got together and discussed ways in which we might try to embed some corpus linguistics into these boys' homework tasks. And what we found was that we showed them to do certain things that we thought were fairly easy and that they wouldn't have any trouble with, and that they would go ahead and search for these things. But then what we actually found upon observing them was that they actually went ahead and searched for a lot of things that we didn't tell them to.
Mm,
And they would start using the Corpus platform in ways that we didn't predict.
mm.
And these kids were like 10, 11 or 12 years. I can't remember the exact age, but they were like pretty young, right? Pre high school. But they really surprised us with what they were able to do once they saw the potential of what they could do. So, I mean, we haven't followed them since the book was published, so I don't know if they're still using the software. And I guess that's a kind of problem for DDL research as a
Mm.
whole. And I talk about that a lot in an upcoming book chapter that I've done with Alex Bolton about, some of the limits of DDL research. Some of the problems is like follow-up studies. Um, but yeah, it's amazing how even the younger they are, the more willing they are to test stuff and experiment. I mean, I get this like even with my own daughter. I come in and she's doing things in PowerPoint that I have no idea how to
Yeah.
do, right? I'm like, how did you do that? And she's there like doing a 3D model with like annotations on it. It's like, yeah, I was just messing about.
Yeah, exactly.
And the kids are like that with the corpus software as well. It's like, what did you do there? It's like, no, I don't know. I just pressed this. I wanted to press it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And then
so
and that visualizing data in a
it's weird
specific
how
way.
they
Yeah. But yeah, I think that let's say that that's a very good point. I mean, also a benefit or an affordance, let's say, to try to use corpora or DDL, let's say, with primary schools, not in, let's say, not necessarily in English, but also, let's say, in our case, in Spanish, that would help them a lot. And actually, you can find different types of corpora. And now that you mention it,
yeah,
actually, with some of my colleagues, we've done research, let's say, on based on DDL. Well, that's true because it was in a course that was very successful, but it's just a course that that's given once a year. So it's the only time that we can actually, let's say, check it again would be like when we see another group of students the following year. Unless we will have to try
I
to
got that.
include it. Yeah. So it's difficult to, let's say, do a follow up.
I guess that we have that, but we're seeing now the creation of more resources in terms of like complete lesson plans. So something that I might show you here on my screen is work that I've been doing with. See, this is something else my daughter's managed to put on my screen here. You see, every time
I
I
love
open a
it.
new tab, I got this like dab thing. I don't know how she does this, right? But there it is.
So for
So
you, will
this
have
is
to do some
something
research.
that this is a suite of materials. I could probably just show you a little bit of this because it's not completely ready yet. But we've got here materials. These are developed by teachers in Brazil who
Great.
have completed DDL course with my partners at the University of State University of Sao Paulo, and they develop lesson activities that include that are suitable for like primary school students. So maybe I can show you one here about finding out about love, the word love, and what you can do with it. So there's different activities here that get them to consult corpora for the word love, and then to look at a video and try to find out some more information about love, and then to use other tools like Versatext, which kind of allow you to build a mini corpus out of some text that you copy and paste into it. Um, and by getting them interested in the word love and getting them to consult these different kinds of repositories and information to find out as much word as they can, as much information as they can, sorry, about this word, it just makes the lessons so interactive.
Absolutely.
And we're building repositories of these lesson plans We're going to have quite a few that come up here. It's not quite finished yet, but we've got here
Awesome.
about criminal vocabulary. So that's probably one for high school. Is this love is probably more suitable for like lower secondary or even higher primary, and so on. And there's also other resources similar to this. One by somebody who appeared on my seminar series previously, Ellen LeFol. She's also done a suite of corpus activities that are suitable for primary and lower secondary school. Hear about the weather, transport invitations, and then some other lesson ideas for upper secondary, and then content and language integrated learning, and then all the way up to university and vocational education. So the more we start to
Yeah.
see these course books that explicitly introduce or embed corpus activities within a complete lesson plan, that's when you really start to win over teachers in the training workshops, because they're used to lesson planning, they're used to doing this kind of work day in day out, but what they don't have is the ability to take their knowledge of the technology and work out where to put that. But by following these kind of preset lesson plans and then getting them to build their own, that's something that really kind of brings it home to them about the possibilities. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, the possibilities are, let's say, are endless, So let's say it's basically trying to, let's say, like you said, maybe have an idea of something like a sort of package of materials. Not only, using, because using software takes time, you have to spend some time, learn how to use it. And also,
that's right.
yeah, in my case, I've been using a lot of Anconk, at university. Now there's
Yeah, and Angkok's a great resource, and it's something that is used in still many DDL studies, and especially the latest version now of Angkok. The way that Lawrence has set that up to have the concordances display by order of the frequency of
yeah,
the
yeah,
next three words that come along has really changed the way that people query like the I guess one of the difficulties people used to have before was that we would search for something, and then in order to get the information they wanted, they would have to click through like three or four different
yeah,
steps.
yeah.
But now with changes like that, and it's not just Hancock, but like other tools are also doing this as well, and including a tool that I'm also developing myself at the moment. But changes like what Lawrence has done there has meant that instead of clicking through like two or three different functions to get the information that you need, instead now a student can go ahead and click, like type in one word, and then they automatically see that information that is coming out of the corpus data. So that's it seems like even Lawrence says it's like a very small change, but it actually makes a
Important.
huge difference
Absolutely.
to the way that people read concordances and to the simplicity of the tools for DDL. So, yeah, definitely recommend AntConc and some of the other tools like Lingle, for example, by Jason Chang, and Skell, which
Yeah.
is produced by the Sketch Engine team. They all do a lot of this kind of stuff, like right off the bat. So the tools now are that good that they're getting simpler and simpler and simpler. And the simpler they get, the better they are for bringing more people into using them. Because previously, I think a lot of people were put off by the technical aspects
The
or
complexity
learning
of,
how
like
to
you said,
use the tool.
the
And
interface.
now those problems are just not are disappearing rapidly.
Absolutely. Yeah, the interface was sometimes not very user friendly. And
Yeah,
actually, yeah,
I mean there's a ton of tools like I mean I don't want to name names, but there are some tools out there that I see when I review a lot of research papers that come in for review, like as an editor or as a reviewer, and they're like, we use this tool. And straight away, I'm kind of like, why? Why did you do that? Why did you torture these poor people, getting them to use this particular tool? Studying for like hours how it works with this horrible interface, and then
yeah.
suddenly like they expect their students to do it. It's like, no,
No,
that's not
yeah.
going to happen.
I think you have to find something.
I'm not going to name tools, but there are some out there
Okay.
that are pretty popular that are just horrendous for that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And actually, yeah, I mean, I've been in communications with the people in charge of sketch engine. So hopefully I'll get the chance to interview them uh, because it would be great.
Yeah, sketch
Let's say,
engine people are really good. As I said, I'm currently working with one of the creators of Skell, I think Vic Weiser, on developing a new tool for myself. So that's currently a work in progress. It's going to be called Corpus Mate, which is pretty Australian thing to call it, I guess.
yeah, absolutely.
And that should be ready for some demos probably in the new year.
Absolutely great. Congratulations then. I mean, I'm going to be, let's say, expecting it just to, let's say, try it. I
Yeah,
mean, the name sounds awesome already. Corpus Mate.
I know you can't lose, can you, with that? You know.
Yeah, that's, let's say, great. But let's say I'm teaching a course called Introduction to Corpus Linguistics here at the Universidad de Santiago, and there are so many tools, but we have to be very careful. I'm teaching that with a colleague of mine who's doing a PhD in Lancaster University, Kevin Garrick, um,
Yes.
and there are so many tools that are out there, so we have to be very careful. Let's say try to choose one or two because
Yeah,
otherwise,
I mean, even Lancaster have their own tool, or they
Lanksbox.
got a couple of tools, right?
Yeah,
So they got the BNC Lanks tool, which is like their tool for DDL, I guess. That's
Lanksbox.
kind of and we had a talk a couple of weeks ago in our seminar series by Dana Gablasova from Lancaster, who introduced that tool to our audience, and there's certainly a lot of potential there. And then, of course, you've got Lanksbox, which is their kind of research tool, but then a lot of people have also been using that for DDL as well. So Lancaster's a great center for corpus linguistics, and as we all know, but they've also made a lot of progress in DDL as well. So
Absolutely. Um, let's say Peter. Let's say now to try to start finishing. We can do this like many other times, but I have so many questions for you. Let's say, what suggestions would you give teachers who would like to include some activities based on corpus linguistics and DDL in their lessons? What's something that you would say that would be,
yeah.
let's say, necessary to try to include them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think my answer would be to try to identify some issues with your current teaching practice that where students have language related problems. Try to identify what that problems are, and then consult somebody like myself who has knowledge of what's available and can help you narrow down the tool and the data to help you solve those specific issues. Um, and then to have a think about how you might embed that in a teaching situation. So, but certainly, yeah, I think that would be my advice, to try and do like a needs analysis of what your students need. It doesn't even have to even be all of the students in the class. It could be like one of them who's having a specific problem, but their current strategy for dealing with that problem isn't working. So, for example, I've had cases where we've got teachers who've identified particular students who have particular problems, and they're using, for example, like when they come up with a problem, they just go to a translation website,
Yeah.
right? They try to translate something then from their native language into English, for example. But then when you read their written work, it just doesn't really make much sense, and a lot of the vocabulary is incorrect. You know how it is when you try to translate like whole paragraphs and things like that. So then, how can we help that specific person to not maybe stop using translation website, but maybe to have an alternative that they might use if they're not getting the answers that they need from that website? And that's where a corpus application might come in handy for them if they can be shown how to use it and and when to use it to solve the problem that they're having. So really to think about your students, think about the problems that they're having, and try to come up with some creative ways to solve those within the context of what is possible within a language teaching situation.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, you have to, in a way, also understand how they can use technology because, I mean, we have this idea that
Yeah,
technology works in just a specific way, and
100%.
yeah, absolutely, many other things as well.
So I mean, I came up with this during my own research with the secondary school students here in Australia, and that we demonstrated a number of different tools. But the tool that they all liked the most was the closest to Google in
Mm,
look. and
Hmm.
function, and that's the tool Lingle by Jason Chang that I've been touting quite a lot recently. Um, and that's not to say that the other tools like Skell and Sketch Engine, they didn't have their specific things that the students like, but mainly when we look at the student comments, and we got we got a paper, we had a paper out about this year in 2022 in computer assisted language learning that explained that by far the comment that the students had, the most frequent comment was about the tool and the ease of using the tool, the look of it,
Mm.
and that having that ease of functionality and not having things be too complicated. And most students, their go-to thing whenever they want to find anything is Google. They type in
Yeah.
one thing into Google, they then get exposure to a ton of data
Yeah.
actually. So students are already used to synthesizing vast amounts of information and then getting to the thing that they want. So as long as your corpus tool takes that into account, then generally I think that you're on the right path.
Hmm. Thank you very much, Peter, for, let's say, for sharing your experiences and ideas. This was a very good conversation. I mean, we can do this again in the future. Probably you're working on very interesting tools. And I'm a big believer in corpus linguistics and DDL. So I've been trying to push it here in Chile. And actually, yeah, it's a it's a good idea. To share this, and also that other people in other parts of the world are also doing the same.
100%.
Yeah. So if you have any questions or comments, you can reach us at podcast@eltinchile.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And you can visit our website, www.eltinchile.com. And Dr. Peter Crosthwaite, thank you very much again. And if you have any resources that you would like to share with us, um, that would be great. And I can post them in. We usually have like an episode and some show notes that links or articles that you would like to share. I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
other.
So I think anything that I mentioned, I'll send you the link, and then you can include that in the description in the YouTube video. No problem.
Thank you very much.